the mic test.
Peter, are you there?
I can hear you.
Okay,
We should
okay.
be good.
We should be good.
That's good. So I don't know when you lost me.
Pretty much stopped you right as we lost you, so.
Okay. So, I mean, that's sort of a basic background, I think, of the current state of play. Maybe it's most efficient to answer questions, James, that you or your board members have about particular topics or issues.
So specifically for us, one of the concerns we're having is off-airport. We have Florida Statute 333, which talks about airport zoning, as well as Grant Assurance 21. And we're grappling with the issue of navigation easements. It's been longstanding practice of the staff to try and get navigation easements on all zoning changes from ag to residential or ag to commercial or commercial to residential. So that's why the issue came up, and could you just speak on that for a little while?
So let me describe the law and then how it works in practicality. The law is that as an airport sponsor, you are required to protect the approaches to your airport, the airspace approaching your airport, to the fullest extent of your authority. Now, if you were Charlotte County or if you were a city that had zoning authority, that power is obviously extensive. Because you are a special purpose entity, your authority to protect from zoning is much limited. Nevertheless, you are required to do whatever you can to protect those approaches. So best practice include, for example, ensuring that you have navigation easements, ensuring that the county zoning officials understand the importance of protecting approaches. Helping county officials when it comes time for zoning matters, testifying, providing your views on land use changes that could affect the airport. All of those are essential because anything in the range of land uses outside the airport that adversely affects your operations, your airspace, could necessarily affect the viability of the airport. So it's pretty important, and I appreciate that these issues can be controversial. Now, the county is under separate statutory obligations under Florida law to protect the approaches to the airport. But those are quite different than your obligations under your grant assurances to do whatever you can to protect against incompatible land use.
Okay, thank you. Can I open this up to board questions if you have a few more minutes?
Sure.
Anybody?
Sure. Mr. Kirsch, can you give us some examples of incompatible land uses and kind of the extent as to how far geographically those would extend from the airport runways?
So there are two different considerations in looking at the location, and I'll talk about types of use. The first is noise, and most jurisdictions use a 65 decibel DNL contour as the area that has to be protected against incompatible land uses. Some airports, for example, Naples Municipal, uses a 60 contour, which is a much greater area. That's a matter of local decision. So that's to protect against incompatible noise. The second is to protect the approaches to the airport, and there's no magic number here. But what airports need to do is to look at what's called the extended runway center line and look at a reasonable distance beyond the edge of the airport to make sure that those approaches are protected. Now let's talk about what's incompatible. At the easy end of the scale, incompatible is development that's too high. That is, it violates the Part 77 obstructions such that, in fact, the plane crash into it. Those are extreme examples, but they include things like cell towers and things like that, particularly on the approaches to the airport. The second and largest category are residential uses, and generally it is thought of that residential uses within the 65 DNL contour are considered to be incompatible with the airport. Various different formulations have made of this, for example, requiring noise insulation in multifamily homes, but prohibiting single-family homes is pretty common. The philosophy being people spend less time outdoors if they are in high-rises or in multifamily homes than if they are in single-family homes. But homes are the classic example. There are other examples, such as schools, churches, daycares, and any other areas where people will accumulate, where there will be big groups of people near the airport. So, common one is soccer fields and play fields. Parks are often acceptable, but there's a real gray area there as to whether a park is going to attract a lot of people. So those basic principles apply to take care of almost all instances of incompatible land.
And now about airport protection and land use compatibility codes that local governments put into effect. Those are sort of based off of FAA guidelines, are they not?
They are generally, yes.
And that is meant to also protect airports. We're required to have them, or the counties and local governments are required to have them, but does that also protect the airport?
It sure does. I mean, the basic principle here is that if the jurisdictions around the airport fully comply with Chapter 333 of the Florida statutes, that will probably take care of almost all, maybe all, of your obligations as an airport sponsor, because Chapter 333 is modeled on your grant assurance obligations to protect the areas around the airport.
Okay, so in this case, because the city of Punta Gorda and Charlotte County both have these airport protection overlay codes, and we don't have residential within our noise contour map region, we should be, generally speaking, pretty safe.
Yeah, I mean, I'd want to look to make sure that the codes in the county and the city, in fact, do comply with these standards. They generally do, but I want to double check. And if they do comply with the standards, yes, you are in good shape. Now, that being said, there are some airports that take a more aggressive stand on land use compatibility because they are growing. And by that I mean that airports take the position that if there is compatible land use a little further from the airport, areas that are a little less noisy, they often want to protect those areas from what's called encroachment, that is the gradual increase of residential. Not because it is legally prohibited, but because it's simply good practice. When you already have vacant land that's compatible, making it incompatible closer to the airport simply introduces a challenge when or if an airport grows. And so there's some examples of that. Raleigh-Durham Airport, North Carolina is the best example. That was very aggressive for literally dozens of years, preventing residential anywhere near the airport because they believed that would not only protect the integrity of the approaches, but also prevent the inevitable political problems that come when homeowners realize that they live near an airport. But that's not legally required, it's just good practice.
I have one more question, if that's okay.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Kirsch, for humoring me. When it comes to easements generally, are governments allowed to require landowners to grant easements as a condition of granting permits or developing their land?
Yes, and let me explain the value of this. First of all, in conjunction with a discretionary permit, for example, a discretionary land use authorization, the government can require avocations. Avocation easements are lovely for lawyers, and they're not much more valuable for anybody else. And here's the reason. Avocation easements is a property right that says the airport has the right to overfly someone's property. And they cannot sue the airport over noise, pollution, or other impacts to the aircraft. That's terrific. Lawyers love that. However, no avocation easement ever prohibits somebody from complaining. It never prohibits somebody from testifying in front of the city council. And so while avocation easements do in fact provide valuable legal protection, they provide you almost no practical protection against the problems that come from incompatible land use. For that reason, I'm not a big fan of avocation easements instead of compatible land use. Certainly navigation easements in conjunction with new development that's right around the edges, that is legally permissible but unwise, a navigation easement is a very good idea. But a navigation easement to permit homes in your approach pattern or homes within your 65 D&L contour would be a very imperfect solution, in my view.
Now, under Chapter 33.12, that's the Florida statute that deals with navigation easements specifically, it states that the political subdivision owning and operating the airport may acquire by purchase, grant, or condemnation in the manner provided by Chapter 73 such navigation easements. So is that's the Chapter 73 is the eminent domain statute, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it is, we have the right to buy the navigation easement or,
Yeah, you can. That's not used very commonly. But here's the most common way, the two most common ways navigation easements are acquired. The first and most common is new development, and the local government requires that navigation easement be granted in favor of the airport in order to approve a project. The second most common is airports that engage in sound insulation, that is, they voluntarily insulate homes that are already incompatible. In exchange for that free sound insulation, homeowners are generally required to give a navigation easement.
Right.
That's a little bit of the, if you will, what lawyers refer to as quid pro quo. It's the payment in exchange for the free sound insulation. That's generally where navigation easements come into play. The purchase or the condemnation of a navigation easement is really quite uncommon.
okay.
Mr. Kirsch, Rob Hansick, I just want to make sure everybody is clear on this. The zoning authority, whether it be city or county, some type of a municipality, can require, as a part of a zoning change, a navigation easement.
Well, let's be a little bit precise here. If someone is entitled to construct as a matter of right, the local government cannot require navigation easement. But if a homeowner seeks a discretionary approval, then as part of that discretionary approval, the local government can require navigation easement. So if the land, let me give you two examples. If the land is already zoned for residential, and all you need is a building permit, because the building permit is not considered to be discretionary, cannot put a navigation easement requirement on that building permit. On the other hand, if property is zoned for agricultural, and a homeowner wants it rezoned for residential, that is a discretionary act, and the local government can seek a navigation easement as part of that approval. Does that make sense?